My name is Maria Singleton. I'm the Head of Proposition for Supply and Optimisation at Bytes. And what does that mean? That basically is anything relating to software asset management, FinOps, any of those initiatives where we're talking to customers about how do we drive down that overall spend within our IT budget, specifically around software, although obviously there are hardware elements to this as well. So I guess we're all feeling the pinch at the moment in terms of overall sort of financial stresses and strains. And I guess that's also coupled with the fact that there's lots of great tech being released into the market of late. And the challenge, I guess, is that all your budgets have been sort of defined 12 months prior, 6 months prior. So how do we then start looking at releasing some of that funds into some of this smart tech that's coming downstream? Because obviously by investing, it helps with that sort of agility and lots of different sort of initiatives within our estate as well. Other things that we're seeing quite prevalent in the market as well, there's a lot of gaps in talent. So, you know, I guess I don't know if this is a byproduct of Brexit, but we're certainly talking to customers where actually, in terms of their headcount for highly qualified people, there's a lack of them. And that's both across the sort of technical side and also within procurement streams as well. So you're trying to squeeze down your budgets as much as you can to interrogate and work smarter within what your spend is, but you've got a finite number of resources to do that as well, and also deliver all of these fantastic projects that you're running to help kind of address the challenges and the ultimate goals of an organisation. So I guess the kind of key challenges you're going to have as well over the term of any contract. So when we are looking at IT spend, typically your 80% of your spend is in your top sort of 20% of vendors, 20% of technology stack, and your focus for both IT teams and for your procurement teams as well is around that biggest section of spend. But there is a lot of effort associated to understanding how do we end up with variances in our budget. So if we have unexpected spend, you know, cloud is a typical one. So we have lots of customers who have engaged in kind of migrations to cloud, but has it been more cost effective than having those on-prem architectures? I think we're on the fence on that one. But actually we need to manage that, and that's kind of key here. And again, when we look at that in the backdrop of the fact that I have a finite number of resources to do that, how do I actually do that? It puts a lot of strain on my people within the team. We have to deal with the new demand, you know, this new tech that we're talking about today. Cloud migrations, we've talked about that as well. So in terms of accelerating the migrations into cloud. So these are all things that will happen over the term of a 12 or 36-month contract. And how do you then build that into a flexibility into the contracts that you are designing at this point in time, given that everyone will have multi-year contracts for one vendor or another? You know, to address any business changes as well. So I might have some mergers and acquisitions that take place, you know, and in fact, actually, a lot of the vendors do that as well. You know, the likes of Microsoft, those sorts of vendors, they have lots of acquisitions. They're a very acquisitive company, but that will have an impact on me if I'm in a multi-year contract, because what tends to happen is, you know, clauses start to slip into those agreements that might have an unexpected impact on my annual spend. So it's understanding and controlling all of those variables to make sure that I'm fit for purpose. But that is, I guess, on the right-hand side, you're right. I'm guessing all of those probably are an issue for you guys as well. The whole, you know, your contracts are going up. So we are seeing it as a supplier that we're having to deliver messages to customers that year on year contracts are going up at least 10%. So that's a challenge. And so much so that some of them have actually communicated to their customers to say, this is now our pricing policy. We will increase our spend 10% every year. And that again, is a challenge for you guys. Tail spend. So I talked about that big focus on, you know, here are our strategic vendors. All my IT people are very much capable of delivering against all of the technology that's in those key vendors. But there are niche vendors within every single estate, so there's a huge amount of tail spend. And that's where we're seeing a lot more focus. So we've kind of eked out as much as we can within those strategic vendors. Is there anything that we can do around that tail spend as well? So I'll talk about that in a minute. and support costs. And I'm guessing this might be a topic for discussion with you all. Maybe if you want to come downstairs and talk about that at the desk downstairs. But we are speaking to customers who are being approached by vendors to tie them into multi-year deals, and support contracts are based on consumption because everything's based on consumption now. But have your support incidents increased over that period of time? You know, yes, probably if you're going through some sort of transformational activity, but is that short term or long term? If you've been tied into a 36-month contract, is that a cost-effective route to actually consume support? And is that the best route for you? So I'll talk about that in a minute as well. So one of the key areas that we help customers a lot is around managing those strategic vendors. If I take Microsoft, for instance, but we also do this for IBM, Oracle, SAP, other vendors. We have specialist consultants within Bytes that are highly knowledgeable around, current licensing rules, but more importantly as well, how you got there. So, I've been at Bytes for longer than I care to mention, but needless to say, I could actually be the parent of some of the people that work at Bytes currently. But they have changed over time. But what we have to consider is actually, can we leverage historic license rules, those sorts of things around the way we're currently consuming. But in addition to that, when we come to do renewals, it is a perfect opportunity to start aligning your strategic goals in terms of what tech you're going to be deploying, when you're going to be deploying it by, how you want to maybe profile users. Are there different user communities within your estate? We've got lots of little segments who have different requirements from a tech perspective, and that has a direct impact on your licensing requirements. A lot of customers historically, we're talking to them now and then, 3 years ago, they maybe went into an agreement, probably just before COVID or just when it hit, and they've gone into an agreement that is pretty standardised across the board. And there is a certain level of overspend because a lot of that is cloud-consumed software. What would happen if you then came to a renewal and you did an activity to profile your users and actually you right-sized the agreement? That's one of the key things here as well. Other things in here, you maybe have not a complete investment into the Microsoft stack. You could be using other vendors. You might have other security products in there. What is the impact of those contracts if you were to standardise on Microsoft, if we were to remove those renewals? So that is in itself is a saving. How do you do that? Are they fit for purpose? When do you want to actually adopt those? Is it now or is it in two years' time? It's understanding all of the variables around your contract renewal. We call this the commercial advisory service. And the result of this is actually a presentation back to customers where we give you maybe start off with 8 options, and we'll know straight away that 4 or 5 of those can be completely excluded because they don't align to your corporate goals in terms of when you're going to be deploying software and so on. But what we'll end up with is 3, maybe 4 valid pricing modelled options that address all of your issues or your needs in terms of when you want to deploy tech. We've also leveraged our understanding of the contracts because we're one of Microsoft's largest resellers within the UK. So we have a lot of expertise and experience about what has been allowed in these contracts historically, and we work with you then to get the best deal from you. So I guess sort of 3 months in before your actual renewals is a good time to start talking about, actually, can I do this a bit more strategically? Can I make sure that the contracts are right sized to give me flexibility to deliver the technology that I want to deliver 2 years down the line? And that's fundamentally what the commercial advisory service is. So just a couple of stats on that. So what we see from this activity, and this is, it's, I think given lots of time, we would all like to be able to have the due diligence within our contracts to be able to kind of do all of this in-house. But quite often you've got, busy departments that have to do this themselves. And actually we bring in that expertise and knowledge around contracts and the vendors in scope. And typically we can save about 34%. If you went to a vendor directly and just asked for a discount, you'd maybe get maybe 5%. This is a much more strategic way of doing it, and it helps to then validate your decisions as part of this. We save customers an awful lot of money annually on this as well. And I guess the key thing here is that 9 out of 10 customers who have done it, who have gone through a commercial advisory service with Bytes, they will come back to us for a repeat service. And whether that be at the end of a contract, so 36 months down the line, they'll come back and say, that service you did for us 3 years ago, we want to do it again. There's that piece. But in addition to that, if there are transformational activities, we can engage with you to then understand what impact is that going to have on the way that you consume the technology, whether that be the sort of Microsoft, it's topical at the moment with SAP as well, with the kind of RISE contracts and those sorts of things. What is the best route for you from a commercial perspective? So that's the number one, commercial advisory services. Strategically align your contracts to your technology needs. The next area, and I mentioned tail spend as well, and again, this is very topical with most of my customers. We talk to them about, the feel that they have got most of their strategic vendors all aligned. They're very comfortable with the way that they're actually dealing with those vendors as well. However, the tail spend is a little bit of an unknown area. And the tail is when I'm talking about, it might be contracts under 100K, but the challenge around those is there are numerous of them. We're talking hundreds here, 150, 200 contracts. It might be that actually you don't even know the detail around those contracts. But what you do know is that the vendors are changing the way that they license product, and they are also changing some of the terms around their contracts. So we need to really have a look at that, because you could be letting unexpected risk into the business by clauses like audit clauses, auto-renew clauses, indemnity clauses are changing. But also there is a lot of spend tied up in there that actually, if I'm making an investment that actually strategically I want to go to Microsoft, I want to have all this great stuff. It's, all of my team are doing transformation activities that are supporting the business, and this is my direction of travel. Why do I have other technology within the business that I have to then support that does the same thing? So how do I get sight of those? How do I then remove those? I can do that through a procurement advisory type service. And it's adding that due diligence, removing and eradicating contracts where actually we're not using it, because quite often as well for the tail spend, it'll just auto-renew. You don't have a clarity who the stakeholders are. It's been used in somewhere in the organisation, but you just renew it. So it's removing those lines. Now, I just hasten to add, the sorts of savings that we're seeing from customers who are managing their tail spend more effectively, it's around 20%. So what could you do with the 20% saving around your tail spend to deploy new tech? It kind of it makes sense. And in addition to that, in one single year, we're able to cut 10% of the contracts of alternative vendors when you've got a strategic vendors, and those are the technology stacks you want to use within the estate. So that's quite a key element to it. And again, there's that whole piece about making sure you've got the due diligence around the contracts that you are signing for either 12 months or multi-year, because multi-year is obviously a bigger challenge, around things like terms changing, audit clauses being brought in. And as I said, I mentioned Micro Focus. They acquire organisations, and then the first thing that they'll do is they'll change the terms in a renewal that perhaps is a very small product, but they have a larger scale of products out there, and you've let an audit clause into your business as a risk. So that's the tail spend. The next one we talked about, or I highlighted at the start, is this whole conversation about FinOps. So FinOps is very, very topical. We have teams of analysts who work as extensions of our customers' teams to provide them analytics and detail around what their cloud spend is. And, it's been quite a fast-moving kind of initiative around cloud. Most customers at the start of, before COVID, were kind of on the fence on it. Everybody is in cloud now. And is it actually driving down spend? I think we've had other conversations with customers around this, and other presentations where actually people have been on the fence. Has it actually delivered those cost savings? Now, there's challenges we all know around that sort of visibility, and also it's very different conversations. Procurement people are very used to all of the historic licensing metrics. When we start to move to cloud, the metrics have all changed. It's all consumption based. The language is different. So it's highly complicated. And what we're looking to customers and talking to customers about is these sort of FinOps principles, and most organisations are trying to adopt them in one way, shape or form. But again, we have, in the backdrop of the fact that we have a finite number of resources, it starts to become quite a challenge, and that's where we come in as well. Aligning to the sort of principles around FinOps, making sure you've got visibility. So we have tool sets. I've got one slide on that. I won't bore you with it too much, but it's quantum tool sets for either your Azure platform or your 365. And looking at the vehicles that vendors provide to you to reduce that spend, use them a little bit more effectively. And there's been a lot with Microsoft. So if you look at reserved instance, hybrid benefit, these are also either forward purchasing or using your existing licenses, the sort of value plans as well, whether or not they are appropriate to the way that you are consuming the products or the resources within cloud. Move on to the next. And some of the benefits we're seeing, again, by using hybrid benefit and reserved instance, you can make up to a 70% saving in your Azure spend, for instance. So, if you're not talking about these, you're not looking at talking to your account manager about Bytes about it, or talking to people about how you can actually apply that to your infrastructure. You might be going through a certain amount of change, but how long is that change taking? If it's 6 to 12 months, well, you can buy a reserved instance for 12 months, and actually is that going to drive down the overall cost for those implementations? And the way I apply them as well, it could be by subscription, it could be across a family. So there's different ways, and navigating through that is where Bytes come into it as well. Perfect. And I guess the other thing here is that whole charge back and show back. We've got tools that will you can customize so that they will give you details of the spend at an organizational unit level, at a cost center level, or at any sort of mixture of reporting that any stakeholders would require within the business as well. So that tool set is Quantum. And as I said, Quantum gives us details around, how do you optimize your estate? It's underpinned by rules that AI, basically, and it will provide you some recommendations around, we can see that you've got a certain number of resources that are eligible to apply reserved instances to, and you would make an XYZ savings by applying those. There's not always, it's not always a silver bullet. There will be certain reasons why you might or might not apply some of those recommendations, but it's a starting point. And actually, when you see that there might be enough savings within there, when you consider how large some of your spend is. And we have customers who, in the first year of engaging with Bytes around CISO services, we're talking millions of pounds worth of savings, to the extent that the service pays for itself as part of that. The final then is around support. So we're having lots of conversations with customers where support is a challenge. It's changed. It has changed. We've gone through a lot of transformation, and now the price of those support contracts are increasing. And that's not just sort of Microsoft, it's multi-vendor as well. But what hasn't changed is necessarily our requirements of that. So we still want to have, 24/7 break fix. We want to have, whether or not we want to follow the sun in terms of our support contracts. But the number of support tickets that we typically would raise hasn't increased to the extent that our support prices have increased. And actually, do I need support for other vendors as well? Can I then consolidate multiple contracts into single contracts? And that's what the conversations that we're having with customers more currently. I think it's the other area as well is that I want a contract that can also give me access to some of these technical resources that I don't have in-house. I don't have the sort of breadth of skill set within my organisation. But again, that's where Bytes come in. We've got our technical pre-sales team and our partner ecosystem can then provide support or kind of advisory type activities for you as part of that definition of where you're going to from a strategy perspective. Oh, I think I've pressed too many times. So again, I guess kind of the key things here. So customers who are looking at refining or perhaps changing some of their support contracts, there are savings to be had there by looking at a if you're moving away from a specific vendor in terms of their contract and looking at the support providers that are out there, you can have savings, and typically they are pay as you go as well. So you are paying for what you're using rather than the consumption across your entire estate. So that's kind of one of the key areas, and it can be multi-vendor.